Another ancient god of One Piece has been revealed, and her world-ending power is so great that celestial dragons fear her even more than the Sun God Nika. The cover page of One Piece chapter 1182, titled Zaza, features Fujitora enjoying some udon that was proudly made by a fox and tanuki duo. They were moved to tears by the appreciation by such an esteemed patron. And listen, before we dive in, if you've been watching our chapter videos for a while, you might notice that this one is a bit different. Recently, YouTube has been pretty heavy-handed and just as vague when it comes to the enforcement of their new content standards. We've suffered from unfair buster calls on this channel before, so to avoid any trouble, we just have to shake up the formula a bit. Now, I know a lot of you guys enjoy our dramatic narrative approach, so I'm sorry if it's not your cup of tea, and I hope you can understand. Now, last time, Loki went head-to-head against Imu. The Prince of Elbaf suffered some terrible blows, but didn't back down. Loki struck and hurled a distracted Imu into the Atom Tree. Then he turned into a dragon and launched Thorheim for good measure, but Imu fended it off with an attack of his own. Now, we have another reminder that the Nidhogg's greatest strength is also something of a major weakness. He is just way too big, so keeping track of an opponent, even one of comparable size to his regular form, is incredibly difficult. Although to be fair, Loki's eyes are usually covered, so I doubt he's much of a visual person to begin with. But Loki can still feel Imu's presence, so relying on observation haki is his best bet here. And with Imu's haki being as extremely strong and sinister as it is, it must be hard to miss. Meanwhile, Imu still had a smile on his face. So like Gear 5, he spends a lot of time smiling. Go figure. And now, instead of speaking to Loki like he was previously, Imu addresses the Nidhogg. He marveled at the fact that, once again, they've been able to meet one another in this world. And he also calls the dragon a traitor, which is to say that somehow they were once on the same side. Considering the fact that they call themselves celestial dragons and revere the legendary creatures, it's not hard to imagine this sort of connection. And the god of war, whom Loki shares most of his powers with, is also said to have battled the sun god. Imu even tried to make that happen again with Luffy and Loki, but failed for some reason. While Loki is breathing heavily thanks to his injuries, Imu is dealing with a coughing fit of his own. But instead of being from any damage Loki's been able to inflict, this is an indication of Imu's time limit, the danger or cost associated with his separation from the Holy Land. Loki approached the devil amidst a storm of thunder and snow, the latter being enough for Imu to recognize another legendary figure, remarking that their inherently related powers of lightning and ice possess incredible synergy. Imu was delighted to see Ragnir again, and apparently the old squirrel hasn't changed a bit. But while Imu felt nostalgic, Ragnir was nauseated and enraged. Clearly, the rodent does not like Imu, because only in One Piece would the devil and a squirrel have beef. Here, we have proper confirmation that Ragnir began as an ancient hammer that went on to eat the mythical squirrel fruit, model Ratatoskr. Ratatoskr, the ice squirrel, is said to have been the god of war's loyal partner. Interestingly, the god of war also wielded Ragnir when it was just a weapon. And thanks to originally being a weapon, Ragnir is functionally immortal. Pre-time skip, Logia powers were king, but Zoan types have been on a crazy run for a while now. And Ragnir seems pretty talkative, so a conversation between him and Chopper could be game-changing. Ragnir prompted Loki for a combination move, and began projecting a torrent of snow. Loki then supercharged it with electricity to unleash a destructive bombardment. Ragna 5 arrows! Imu responded with an attack of his own. He expanded, raised, and aimed his 16-eyed flaming ring, and from it came a barrage of demonically sinister and highly explosive faces. Sisimil Nova Eclipse! Loki and Ragnir's resistance here looks like an old arcade game. And like those old games, a high score is possible, but victory is not. Loki has already suffered a blow to the wing here, but he is still far from finished. But now that move from Imu is actually a major lore drop. In Aztec mythology, a Sisimil, please pardon my pronunciation if it is terrible, is a celestial god related to stars, particularly the stars nearest to the sun during a solar eclipse, hence the eclipse portion of the attack's name. Now, this lines up very nicely with what we learned from the previous chapter, that Imu himself was once close with Joy Boy, a previous user of the Sun God fruit. In terms of appearance, the Sisimime, which is the plural of that, again pardon me, are said to have worn skirts with skulls and crossbones on them. Imu wears several bones on his lower body, as did the ancient giant Ors. And skulls and crossbones are of course a known representation of pirates. So this could point to the ancient origins of Jolly Rogers. Interestingly, after the Aztecs were conquered, the Sisimime went on to be described as devils, and their proximity to the sun was actually due to them attacking it, as during the eclipse, they would descend upon the earth and possess the bodies of men. Imu has very reasonably been likened to a devil, has a grudge against the sun god, and is no stranger to bodily possession. Due to all this, Sisimime were feared, and connected to the fear of change. Furthermore, the Aztecs believed in the 5 suns, that the world itself has repeatedly experienced cycles of creation and destruction, and as a result, gods have destroyed the world 4 times over in response to the people's actions and behavior, making the current world the 5th era. Elbaf's ancient mural showed us that the world of One Piece is much the same with its 3 eras, each of which include a sun god figure, Nika, Joy Boy, and now Luffy. 5 would certainly be a lot, and One Piece is long enough, so we can expect such influences to be especially condensed and even overlapping, something we've already seen plenty of from Elbaf in general, as characters like Loki are many Norse figures and legends wrapped into one. The Aztecs believed that the first god, Ometiat, created itself from the void and became a pair. At first, this might seem to be related to the Void Century, but the context is more like emptiness in the universe, so it has more to do with the void of space. And in that sense, I then liken Ometiat's creation of self to the ancient moon people's creation of the automata, the countless, virtually identical robots they left behind. From there, Ometiat created 4 creator gods, each ruling over one of 4 directions: north, east, south, and west, what I'm sure we can liken to the different blues of the One Piece world. And each of these creator gods acted as the sun for one of the previous 4 eras. First was the sun of earth, then came the son of air, the son of fire, and the son of water. And what we know about Imu seems to be especially relevant to the sun god of earth, Tezcatlipoca of the first era. Early on, the creator gods sought to fulfill their purpose and create the world. However, each of their attempts sunk below the sea and was consumed by a massive Kipakli, a sea monster with many mouths that was a mix between a fish, a toad, and a crocodile. So Tezcatlipoca willingly sacrificed his leg and used it as bait to lure in the creature. The gods killed the creature as it ate, from which point they used its body to shape the earth, create other gods, and make giant humans. From a One Piece lens, the Kipakli sounds a lot like a sea king, and there are of course many mouths among them. They're generally only known for destruction and avarice, and bear resemblance to countless creatures. A creature shown at the very beginning of the series that devoured the willingly sacrificed arm of Shanks, a celestial dragon, what could turn out to somehow mirror a major sacrifice from Imu in the past, perhaps the one that made it difficult for him to venture from the Holy Land. The red line effectively shapes the world since it wraps all the way around it, and was doubly referred to as the Great Serpent soaked in blood by Dory and Brogy. Devil fruits continue to produce gods and beings of great power, and based on the size of that straw hat Imu has on ice, the very notion of ancient giants, and the sheer absurdity of sizes in One Piece, it stands to reason that people might have been very big in the past. Tezcatlipoca was closely associated with the color black, obsidian, and darkness, and was also said to take on hundreds of different forms. He was known for incomparable rage and violence, and was the embodiment of change through conflict. That sounds like a pretty apt description of Imu to me. However, perhaps due to his sacrifice, Tezcatlipoca could only shine as half a sun. So under his rule, the world was a dim place, which to me points to the intentional obstruction of knowledge and restriction of freedoms imposed by Imu's dominion. Eventually, Tezcatlipoca's position was usurped, and he vowed revenge, from which point he becomes something of a major antagonist for each of the following eras. Incidentally, the god that took his position was Quetzalcoatl, the son of air, and during this second era, humanity ended up abandoning divine teachings in favor of greed, effectively rejecting the state of dominion Imu mentioned in relation to Joy Boy, perhaps doing so in favor of pirating pursuits like the very first pirate himself. And funny enough, Tezcatlipoca got his revenge by turning the people into monkeys, what I chalk up to Imu and Joy Boy's ancient conflict inadvertently, yet inevitably, setting Luffy and his crazy family into motion. But we'll get back to the other sun gods since they're more relevant later on. Bonnie tried to catch a glimpse of the fighting, but was called back by Lilith. Bonnie made it clear that she wasn't planning on fighting, at least not against Imu. And supernova or not, Bonnie is still a child. So despite being the Vegapunk of evil, Lilith takes her babysitting very seriously. But at the same time, she can't help but wonder about the new invader's identity. Ultimately, she is a Vegapunk, so as a super genius, it's only a matter of time before she deduces Imu's identity. And from there, who knows what may be gleaned. Just then, Sanji forced himself back onto his feet despite Bonnie's pleas and his grave injuries. It turns out that in the aftermath of his encounter with Imu, St. Killingham showed up to mock Sanji. He was amazed by the pirate's ability to survive a blow from the Great One, but thanks to that, he decided that there was no need for him to get his revenge against the cook. When Sanji asked the Celestial where he was going, Killingham replied that he'd be completing their mission. And now, he has the power of Omen to help him do it. The knight launched off, simultaneously giving Sanji a kick with his hind legs for good measure. But the fact that he let Sanji live at all is upsetting for some people, which is fair enough. I can't help but feel like this guy's been less competent since he left his giraffe-like form. Although, the impression I get here is that he doesn't expect Sanji to survive. I mean, he doesn't know he's a cyborg and all that. And being a sadistic celestial dragon who's been slighted, is more pleased by the idea of Sanji slowly and painfully perishing than he is by the thought of delivering a swift and merciful end to his suffering. So foolish and misplaced confidence, sure, but he's a One Piece villain. One who may have never needed to be as thorough as, say, Crocodile, even in his mockery, because things usually go their way. So I give it a pass. But knowing that the scumbag was still after the kids, Sanji refused to stay down. He mentions here how much Luffy and Usopp admire Elbaf, and how it's his duty to protect it. The sort of devotion that neither Lilith nor Bonnie expected from him. As of course, Sanji's true motivation turned out to be the giant women. And listen man, when Sanji has his moments, they are damn cool. I'm talking about Mr. Prince, or when he was supporting Usopp on Enies Lobby. And this is shaping up to be one of those times. From there, we venture to the Owl Library. Robin and Saul manage to discover a back door leading to an underground passage and secret room. Inside was the Owl Biblo, along with all of O'Hara's books that he managed to save from being burned. Saul was just as grateful as Robin, but suddenly got the impression that Biblo is way more mysterious than he initially believed. And reasonably so. Why is there a hidden room at all? Is there anything else of note inside here? I mean, I imagine there would be if it exists. And how old is Biblo? I mean, the look he gives Saul here looks quite intelligent and very old. Owls are often associated with wisdom and such. There are suspicions that Biblo might actually be the explorer Louis Arnault, but thus far I don't think we've seen anything solid enough to really give that impression. Either way, this is another case where Chopper's ability to communicate with animals would be very handy. Next, we move to the Sea Cloud port nearest to West Village. Now empowered by Omen, Summers was able to sprout wings and is even strong enough to heft an entire giant ship. And considering the sheer size of this thing, I can understand why he decided to start calling himself Super Summers. Doing this with a regular ship would have been crazy. And with that, their kidnapping operation needs to be conducted within a 5-minute time frame, which is exceptionally quick compared to before, and given the vastness of the island. So both these power-ups and Imu's time limit here are no joke. The battle between Loki and Imu was still raging on, and could be seen from West Village. But inside a tavern, Chopper tended to the injured. He managed to reattach Gerd's severed fingers, but admitted that it'll be a few months before they're totally healed. As a fellow doctor, Gerd was upset with her own inability to help out, but Chopper reassured her. Now, this is another point of the chapter that upset many people, mainly because it highlights a reduction of stakes and lasting consequences, which is again a fair point, but I can't really say I expected anything different. Aside from the fact that this sort of medical response is rooted in reality, reasonably speaking, they're manageable injuries to begin with. Personally, I haven't trusted this sort of fake out since like Pell and Igaram in Arabasta, so this doesn't take away from the moment much for me. Meanwhile, Hadrudin is still unconscious. And more than that, what about Stanson? While Gerd is given attention because of her fingers, Stanson is over here smiling after losing a whole leg! Now that is not so easily patched up, so what is the deal here? Regardless, Road was more worried about Gerd's condition. He offered her his fingers if she needs them, but was rejected. However, after seeing how brave he was when saving his brother, Gerd doesn't despise him as much anymore, and even has respect for him. And the sudden rush of excitement from that made the navigator's wounds gush, which certainly made it hard for his brother to look up to him. And now leaving West Village and headed to the port, we have Zoro hitching a ride on Goldberg's shoulder. He's the only member of the new Giant Warrior Pirates that's still at full health. Zoro was convinced that a giant stride would help him cover more ground more quickly, but I'd argue that his sense of direction would have been the bigger issue. And Goldberg's happy to help, relieved to have the Straw Hats with them during such an unprecedented crisis. Zoro explained that Luffy's motto is pretty much that his friend's country is his country, which is wholesome, cool, and scary all at once, so it totally fits Luffy. From there, Zoro began assessing Imu's use of black flames. Firstly, that they suddenly turned into steel bullets and explosives. Secondly, that they've given the previously defeated knights a major power-up. Now, between their summoning via Mudra hand sign and the look of them in Zoro's hand here, these projectiles seem to favor Sintamani, wish-granting pearl-like jewels described in Hindu and Buddhist traditions, literally translating to "as one wishes jewel." In sacred texts, concerning its rarity, glass and gold compared to such jewels is said to be like the pleasures of heaven and liberation compared to the highest state of devotion in Hinduism. The Sintamani is also said to be one of 4 relics that came in a chest that fell from the sky. For me, the mentions of heaven and liberation evoke thoughts of the distinctly opposed yet fruitful paths that Imu and Joy Boy followed. Which is to say that the origins of these black flames are even grander than the world's most coveted riches, something that comes from a world beyond, ergo, ancient Burka on the moon. It's also worth noting that Zoro holds his shoulder here, much like Sanji did with his own earlier, so it seems like the wings of the Pirate King know that they've been clipped and have a responsibility to fly for the sake of their captain. In the end, Zoro knows that if they don't handle things quickly, they'll take a turn for the worst. So both sides are in a race towards the finish. Returning to the port, St. Summers was on a call with a frantic St. Killingham. The powered-up fool overdid it and ended up summoning his own greatest fear. Running along his vines, Summers reminded the dolt that the result of that is terrifying for all of them. But thankfully for them, St. Killingham seems to believe he can control it. Regardless, they're in a rush to get things done. Killingham also reported that Gunko seemed to be dead, so it looks like Imu's attendant will be left behind on Elbaf, which is sure to give us plenty of new insights and of course drama with Brook. Summers was surprised, but bounced back in a flash. He laid everything out just in case the readers missed it. Imu's body doesn't agree with this world. The forces they need to collect and the ones they need to eliminate are laid out before them. They cannot afford to let Imu down. Then suddenly after that, West Village, which was on fire not too long ago, was now suffering from sudden and severe rain with a high risk of flooding. Killingham commanded his greatest fear to collect the giant children. A titanic hand made entirely out of water grabbed them all in an instant. Then came a pronouncement from the summoner that for those born above the clouds, as the celestial dragons are, the concept of water falling from the sky is terrifying. They all grew up hearing stories about not only the D clan and Nika, but also of the Rain God, the monster who drenches the lower world with water from the sky. The Rain God Zaza has descended, and with her frightful flood comes the rhythm of the rain dance. A smiling St. Killingham just needs to bring the kids to a ready St. Summers. Zoro noticed the god's emergence, and Goldberg wondered if they should run back. That's when Zoro noticed someone else, and decided that there was no need. Zoro shouted at Sanji and told him not to fail. Sanji angrily shouted back the same command. Alright, now first of all, let's begin with the fact that Zaza's infamy is on par with Nika and the D clan. Arguably even greater if she's at the top of the list for one of God's Knights. That scale is worth keeping in mind. In a matter of moments, she produced enough rain to flood an entire giant village. And once again, with the gigantic scale of Elbaf in mind, this move could easily wipe out most of the islands we've seen in an instant. Against most Devil Fruit users, this is an automatic death sentence. But even then, it's important to remember that this titanic threat is just the Dream Demon version. As we've seen, Dream Demon Nika couldn't hold a candle to Gear 5 Luffy, so I'd expect much of the same here. Now, to be fair, Killingham's fear may be more pronounced and detailed than those of the giant children, but the point stands. I love the irony of Killingham's greatest fear being a water deity despite his fishmen features. He mentions being born above the clouds, so unless he suffers from some emu memory alteration, he may be the result of a celestial having a child with an enslaved mermaid. Mafi, one of the knights from the past, similarly has fishmen-like traits. In theory, with Omen and the use of his own biggest fear, this can probably be looked at as the pinnacle of his Devil Fruit abilities. But I'd also imagine that this isn't something he can feasibly regularize, lest he reduce his own fear and therefore make it weaker. So then, how strong must the real Rain God be? I'd say cataclysmic. At present, the world is under threat from rising sea levels, and it would seem as though much of the world has already suffered from the rise of the depths and has been lost for centuries. Also, with Devil Fruits being the manifestations of mortal dreams and beliefs, there's no reason to believe that Zaza doesn't have some manner of related Devil Fruit somewhere out there. I'd furthermore imagine that like the other godly and mythical fruits we've encountered, that is sure to be quite the power. So where might it be, and who may have had it? At this point, we've seen Emu. So save for say the man marked by flames, it should be safe to say that we've seen all the biggest names in modern times. And whether there's a present day user or not, a previous user must have been a serious issue for Emu. With that in mind, the only figure we know that could fit the bill would be Nefertari D. Lily, Vivi's ancient ancestor, the would-be ruler of Arabasta during the Void Century, whom rejected Celestial Dragon status and relocation to the Holy Land, but ultimately went missing before returning to her kingdom. I say this because Emu points to her mistake as the cause for the poneglyphs spreading across the world, something that the Great One now believes to have been intentional and planned. Literally flooding the world with information would be fitting. There's also the fact that rain is never more important in the story than during Arabasta. There we saw that rain, or even the lack thereof, can be a major cause of conflict, or just as easily, the end of it. Then there's dance powder, the artificial substance used to cause rain while causing droughts elsewhere. Zaza happens to come along with a rain dance, natural boss music of her own like the other godly fruits, Luffy's drums of liberation, and Emu's oppressive sound that is yet to be named. Now, as for the present day, if somebody already has the fruit, then Monkey D. Dragon would totally make sense. With his appearance came the sudden and seemingly willful fall of heavy rain that helped Luffy and his friends escape. Dragon is said to be the world's worst criminal, and the power of such a feared god would give reason to that name. The Revolutionary Army has been harassing and starving the world nobles for a while now. And just when Imu left the Holy Land, something we now know to be especially substantial happened. Heavy clouds rolled in. But apparently, it never rains in the Holy Land. So this could be Dragon finally making a move at the perfect time. If so, then this is going to look like the end of the world for the Celestial Dragons. And now we can jump back to the Aztec 5 sons from before. Because the son of fire, Tlaloc, ruler of the Third Era, was also the rain god. Tezcatlipoca, our Imu figure from before, abducted his wife. So in his grief, Tlaloc rained fire upon the earth and caused terrible droughts, something that yet again points to Arabasta. The sun god of water was Xalchiutlicue in the 4th Era. They were especially fond and giving to humanity. She was falsely accused by Tezcatlipoca and overcome by grief. Xalchiutlicue cried bloody tears for many years and flooded the earth, thus turning humans into fish. When it comes to fishmen, Princess Shirahoshi's mother went to great lengths to improve her people's relationship with humanity. She also deeply desired closeness with the sun. Princess Shirahoshi's predecessor, the ancient weapon Poseidon, made a promise with Joy Boy, one that he was unable to fulfill. And as an ancient weapon with the power to command sea kings, her grief could surely sink the whole world. And of course, Shirahoshi herself is a total crybaby. The 5th sun god, which is the current era, is Huitzilopochtli, and unfortunately, he's stuck in an eternal battle against his sister, the moon. Because of this, he needs to be sustained. If the people fail to give him strength, the world will end, which is the whole purpose behind many of the Aztecs' ritual sacrifices. In terms of One Piece, Oda previously depicted Blackbeard, Luffy's character foil, in direct relation to the moon. The ancient Shandians honor the god of the sun, the god of the rain, the god of the forest, and the god of the earth ahead of their ritual sacrifices. And mind you, the ritual we saw was done to avoid being wiped out and during heavy rain. But like Elbaf has shown us, there can be many different interpretations of the sun god even within the same culture. For Luffy, sustenance is just food, which he needs a lot of right now in order to fight Imu. In terms of appearance, Zaza looks incredible. Notably, she wears a veil over her face. Although, this may be a case of cognitive bias from St. Killingham, as we've seen such things be commonplace amongst celestial women and even female slaves. I'm looking forward to seeing if Zaza ends up being an issue for Imu's forces, especially since Killingham wasn't entirely sure if he could control her. Nami was previously fighting a losing battle against the Flames with Zeus's rainwater. Thus far, we've yet to see one of the Dream Demons be recalled. To go away, they've needed to be destroyed. So in theory, since Nami the Thief was able to steal a weather-adjacent sentient being from a powerful Devil Fruit ability in the past, what's stopping her from doing the same thing with this one? Especially since Imu and the Knights are in a rush to leave, this Dream Demon might just stick around. I mean, the god is depicted as a female here, and Sanji is the one to deal with her, a giant woman, which is what he's going there to protect. Speaking of which, Nami's been featured as a giant on a few color spreads by now, so maybe those have been hints. Elbaf already seems to be powering up the crew in interesting ways, so I am all for it. And please give us your thoughts on absolutely everything in the comments. As always, I'm Sliceable Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.